Remember when we were standing at Mount Herzl a few days ago, and I was pointing out how when we were standing next to that general that was buried right next to the private, and I said to you that this is what makes this cemetery or that cemetery so special. So that general, chief of staff that was buried on Mount Herzl, Yigal Yadin, was not only a general, because later on when he quit the army at the age of 40, he went back to his real love in life, and that is archaeology. And it was into the 60s when he was given the opportunity to probably dig the most magnificent site ever dug up in the Middle East. Maybe in the world, but you'll have to argue for that. And he knew that this was going to be amazing, but he didn't know how amazing it was going to be. What did he know was going to be amazing about Masada? He'd read biographies of travelers that have come to the Middle East for hundreds of years. And they all write that they come to the top of this great mountain. It's going to be hard to compete with that.
Guys,
I'll take off my shirt too.
Yeah.
Those are 2,000-year-old ruins, guys.
Yeah, they're going to throw you off.
Come on, come on, come on.
Mike, it looks bad on me. Come down, please.
Wait, really? Really?
Yeah. No, you can't climb up these things. And, you know, even though our reputation can't get any worse than it is.
I think it just it's really fun. We couldn't sink any lower. We destroy Masada.
We're the reason the stock market went down 500%.
Do you know, this is serious, that when we were dancing at the Kotel and the rabbi snipers were aiming their pistols at you, and Tony was up on the chair going up 6 or 7 times, there was an earthquake? 4.3.
Where?
And we didn't feel it. The whole country had an earthquake. I swear to God.
What?
Ask, I swear to God. The exact second I got a message, do you just feel the earthquake? I was like, yeah, when we were at the Kotel, you were asked. So that was Tony.
Why, you felt it?
I'm a good girl.
You felt it? It was Friday.
So,
No, I mean Sunday.
if we pick up Tony for 2 days straight, the Messiah comes.
That's right.
Maybe it's him.
Tony.
Maybe you're the one.
I'm the chosen one. Call me Keanu Reeves. No.
Alright, so we dug this up.
Okay. Where were we?
Guys.
So he goes through these biographies, and they all write about this great mountaintop that people have come to, and they've climbed.
Guys.
Muslim biographers and Jews and Christians, and they all come to this mountain, but they don't see anything because nothing is exposed. It's a big mountain with this building in the center, which was a small Byzantine church that they knew. But everyone knew that there was a great story. And why did they know that there was a great story here? Because they went back to one of the greatest books, historical books written by a guy that we mentioned a few times, Josephus Flavius. This guy that first, when he just started out, he was one of the rebellions. He was the head of the northern army that rebelled against the Romans, and he was taken prisoner later on, and he becomes a historian that pretty much writes the history of this war according to what the Romans want him to write that story. But the most magnificent chapter, or actually 4 chapters, is the end of the book, and that is the story about what happens on Masada. And he leaves an amazing story. And I think for years everybody thought this was a great myth because, you know, it just sounds like Bobomyces, and we're going to talk about that story a bit later. But as they started to dig up this place, Yigal Yadin and the University of Chicago and the Hebrew University throughout the 60s and 70s, they literally were digging up this guy's story. Just to make it real, they actually dug up braids, hair braids that were 2,000 years old, and because of the heat and the special temperature and the surroundings, these things can actually, you know, hang on for a long time. He found sandals 2,000 years old, and he basically was going through this amazing story. We're going to go through this story, okay? And it's going to be very easy because we're going to talk about either the Romans or the Zealots. Because it's a simple story. It's a story that goes through not a long period of time. It starts with a crazy king named King Herod. Some of you heard of him. He has a lot to do with Jerusalem. He wanted to build a temple, and he did in Jerusalem. That temple would be destroyed, of course. But he also wanted to build up the entire area over here. And he built a great city, a harbor called Caesarea. And we didn't get there, but when you come back, and if you're staying here, it's one of the most magnificent sites to visit, that's for sure. But maybe the most magnificent site that he built was this mountain right over here. And when you start to understand what this man did here, and we're going to go and see the palace that he builds in the middle of the desert, nowhere. That's the first side of the story. Herod's temple, the Romans way of looking at the world and that part of the story. But that story means nothing if you don't connect it to the second half of the story, and that is the story of the rebellion against the Romans about 70 years after King Herod, and the end of the story that takes place right over here, and for me, the message that comes out after that, okay? Maybe before on the final note, since Tony has decided to take off his pants, and you're all looking at it anyway, we added a map, and we're going to tattoo it to the entire length of his body from this point on. And as you feel his pain, you'll also notice exactly where we're standing, okay?
Careful what you touch.
Right there! Not really. It's very uncomfortable. Can you pick it up a little bit? Awesome.
Oh, put it down, put it down.
Yeah, it's a challenge, whatever you do. Okay. Very quickly, we landed here at Ben Gurion Airport. We drove up the shore, crossed to the Sea of Galilee. We spent 3 days up in the north, came down through the Jordan Valley, came up to Jerusalem, spent 5 days in Jerusalem, drove down to Tel Aviv. Most of you don't remember what happened there. We drove last night. We drove all the way down, past Beersheba. Some of you went back to Beersheba last night to get some emergency medicine. And we drove all the way down to here. This morning we drove up this way. This is where we started the party on the bus. This is the windiest road in Israel. And we are standing right over here where the Dead Sea, this is this place of this body of water, kind of splits in half, okay? It used to be a much bigger sea and it's drying up, and we'll talk about that later. And we're standing exactly here, okay? This place seems like it is the middle of nowhere, but you should understand that this is an ancient connection that brings together three very important roads. That would be the road that comes down from today's Jordan, the Moab mountains, down from over here, okay? Gaza, which is over here, had an ancient path that also met exactly where we are. And the northern area also connected to its desert exactly at Masada. So Masada is in the middle of nowhere, but it's an important strategical point. Okay, and keep that in your mind where we're standing. We are in the middle of the desert, but it is an important spot, okay? Questions before we continue on?
Yeah. When this place was made 2,000 years ago, it evaporated, so it wasn't salted, right?
The water. Well, the water wasn't created 2,000 years ago. The water was created a lot before that. We're talking about geologic.
But like back then, was there fish in there or anything that could live?
Probably about 4 million years ago there were fish, okay? I won't go into it, but once upon a time, a very long time ago, about 5 million years ago, this whole place was an ocean. Then it dried up, and basically the entire Jordan Valley was a gigantic river that went all the way down. And that started to dry up and dry up and dry up and dry up over a few 100,000 years. And when a sea dries up, it becomes saltier and saltier and saltier, and that's how it is the saltiest sea. And there is about 400 meters of salt packed underneath the Dead Sea. It's an unbelievable place, and it's the number 2 industry in Israel. They scrape the bottom and make unbelievable things. Creams, magnesium.
Unbelievable.
There you go. So it's a pretty amazing things, and geologists from all over the world actually come to study this amazing place in the world, okay? Now we're standing on this gigantic mountain. We are actually below sea level, believe it or not. And that's something very cool that most people don't understand. We are below sea level because down there is very much below sea level, okay? And we're going to get to that later on today. Let's go.
Wait, just 1 second. Guys,